So we are a couple of minutes over the hour, which is probably making Scott a little itchy because he is an on-time starter, I know. So I will kick us off so that we don't get any itchier in the process. Welcome everyone to office hours. Many of you have joined in one of these office hours before, so I won't go over the whole digital transformation residency. Our office hours are an informal opportunity to have a conversation about something that's timely, relevant, a particular aspect of the residency, to talk with Scott about one particular element or area of exploration relative to digital transformation. I think this is our fourth office hours. They are all recorded. You can always get to them. I think we have one more after this. And today's focus is to talk about what the lessons are that we have learned thus far through the residency. So we're 9 months in now, 8.5 months into the residency. We're fresh off of our CEO Institute, where we met with a number of pools who were actively working on their digital roadmaps on site. A number of you were there. And so what we want to do today is just share some of the lessons, and Scott's going to share what he's been hearing from pools and the lessons that he would summarize as most important at this point in the residency. Now, whether you were at the CEO Institute or not, hopefully still today, you are able to find something useful in the conversation. If you were not at the CEO Institute, if you haven't worked on your digital strategy roadmap yet, the package of materials from the CEO Institute, from the residency thus far, they are all available to you. There is a guide on how to do digital strategy road mapping. There is a sample roadmap that you can look at that has some really great pooling relevant language. All of the resources from the residency are available to you on that site that Scott has up on the screen, and that has just been put in the chat as well. So feel free to take a look at all of that. And if you were at CEO Institute, if you went through some of that road mapping with us, some of what you're going to hear today are lessons coming out of that, but also maybe drawing a finer point on a few things that Scott and I have been reflecting on just in the last couple of weeks since the Institute. So we're going to record, we are recording already, the first 25 to 30 minutes of this conversation, which is going to be primarily Scott overviewing what these lessons are, what he thinks is important for all pools to be paying attention to. Then we will turn the recording off, and then we have another hour set aside for your questions, for your ideas, for your comments, and it's really a test the resident. Like we want to see if you can stump our resident Scott in that last hour. So
that is not happening. That is no, we can play stump the speaker all you all want, but I read entirely too much to stump the speaker.
Okay, fair enough. Fair enough. So Scott, that's what I have for intro, and unless you can think of anything I forgot, and otherwise, like, take it away.
I'm only going to pitch this slide harder before I just jump off of it, Ann, because I think you heard the same thing I heard at the CEO Institute. We rolled out these resources, right? A entire workbook that's in a PowerPoint. And if you're one of the people that has not clicked on this link yet and you haven't gone and looked at these resources and you are not in Alaska, I'm not going on until you click this link, because we did a lot of work on these things and it's going to hurt our feelings if you don't click this link and go look at these resources. At the CEO Institute, at the end of it, when we asked people, hey, what did you think of this? We had a handful of people that said, hey, we really, really appreciate that you spent the time to build these resources. Now, these two things, right? The first is a workbook, and that might sound like, oh, it's a 20-page PDF with some information. No, that's not what it is. Like, it's a 75-slide PowerPoint that has all kinds of information about how to build a digital strategy and the sample slides to go build your own. All right. So it's way more than a workbook. It's a PowerPoint with a lot of resources in it. And then we did a sample roadmap. We just tried to create a roadmap that was something, let's just say, not for a big pool or a small pool, but something in between, right? But a sample roadmap of what would a finished digital strategy roadmap look like? Okay, so there you go. Can I go on? Did everybody click who wasn't in Alaska? Or do I need to keep talking about this? I can go on, Eric? Okay, all right, fair enough. I'm moving on then. So in Alaska, there was a slide that we started out with. If you were in Alaska, you'll remember this. If you weren't, it's important that you see this. So, I've been involved in putting together digital strategies for, 30 years? I mean, a long time I've been putting together strategies. I've been putting together digital strategies since you didn't have PCs and you had mainframe terminals and your choice was amber or green, right? I mean, that's how long I've been doing this. So it was interesting. I saw this report that was done, and it was a study on how successful are organizations, getting their digital strategy to actually happen and work. And here were some of the results from this research. Typically, only 5% of the workforce at the pool really understands the strategy. Now, some of that is because people don't even share the strategy with the team members, and some is because the team members just don't understand it. It wasn't explained to them, well, what are we actually trying to accomplish with technology here? All right, I'm going to give you a few more that are kind of interesting, right? Only 25% of managers have any incentives linked to the strategy. This is something that has come up the last few years, is technology is becoming more and more of an important part of the pool. If you think about taking a claims processing system from, kind of on paper and by hand to full digital, and that's a lot of change and change management. And it has a huge impact on the pool. I mean, a very positive impact generally. But when we go to do that, and it could be a 2-year project, what we're finding is a lot of pools, they don't think in terms of incentives of, okay, well, how do we tie some of the performance-based pay or create a bonus system to give people incentives that align with the digital strategy? All right. 60% of pools don't link the budgets to the strategy. In other words, they say, here's what we want to accomplish with technology, but when you actually look at the budgets don't necessarily reflect that. So, for example, I'll just give you a simple example. The strategy might say, hey, we want to provide a much better member experience. For the next year or two, that's our focus. It's member experience. But then you go look at the budget, and the budget is all for doing things with technology that wouldn't even touch member experience, right? So you want to make sure you link what you're spending to actually what the strategy is. All right, 85% of executives' teams spend less than an hour per month even discussing the strategy. Where are we? Now, they may discuss how we doing installing a piece of software, but they don't talk about the strategy as a whole of how well are we doing with the roadmap? Are we on track? Are we not on track? Why are we not on track? If we're not on track, what is it that we need to change to get back on track? Now, what this all results in is this one, and this is really the key. If you forget all the other ones I just said, doesn't matter, just remember this one, that only 10% of organizations ever really execute on their digital strategy as planned. Now, that's either because they don't have the discipline to do it, they don't have the knowledge to really chase the dreams that they have. There can be a lot of different reasons why. Things change a lot in technology and they don't make good adjustments. But what we're here to do is try to change that. We'd love to flip that number and have it be, okay, 90% of pools can execute on their digital strategy as intended, okay? So we just wanted to make sure, we set that up, that it's not easy building a digital strategy roadmap. It is not simple to do that. It's not simple to execute on it over time. This is a new area of strategy. Let's be honest about it. We've been doing organizational strategy since we had organizations. Pools have been, building their pool strategy for the last almost 30 years. But digital strategy is a bit of a new animal, and a lot of leaders, they're not confident with how to even document things or what the process is like. So we're not going to review the process in this podcast. We would love for you to go look at the resources, again, that we've provided to help you with the mechanics of how to do the roadmap. Our point here with this podcast is over the last 8 months or so of doing the residency, there's been kind of 4 key lessons that have come up over and over again with pools building their digital strategy roadmap. So we just wanted to focus on these key lessons. All right. Lesson number 1, when you have a process, the process that we've shared with you, for example, you have to think about it more as, hey, this is just a recommended set of steps, and it creates a journey of thinking, right? It's a way of thinking. You do not have to do it exactly the way that, we line out, but it's almost that way with any type of strategic framework, right? For your pool, based on the size, based on what your focus is for the next 2-3 years, right? Based on some different characteristics, you might actually do the strategy in a little bit of a different way. And so, for example, we might say, hey, we recommend that every pool has 8 dimensions of what their digital strategy is. In other words, 8 key areas of focus. Well, if you're a really large pool, maybe you think 12 would be better. Hey, if you're a small pool, maybe 5 would be better for you. So it's one of the things that we found is in the pool industry, in the pool space, a lot of you are really good rule followers. Now, I'm not talking about Dave Kodal, right? Let's set him aside. I'm talking about everybody else, right? Are pretty good rule followers. It's just some industries have people that are wild hares. This industry doesn't, it doesn't thrive on people that love to break all the rules. And so when you get an industry like that, sometimes when you look at a structure, right, of, okay, here's how you do strategy, people get too wrapped around the axle on the details. And they try to do every detail perfectly because somebody like me is saying, hey, it's really important to do 8 dimensions. I don't mean 8. I just mean it's really important to have areas of focus. That's really what I mean. All right. So that was one of the big lessons we got is you need to feel the freedom to customize this process or this framework that we've given you so that it fits for you. Hit the important points, right? But, make it your own. And so I know I'm telling you to break rules or what you might perceive to be rules. More, I'm telling you, just be innovative and creative with how you do your strategy.
Hey, Scott, the other thing that I think is important about that and, using the framework, working the framework, modifying the framework as it fits your own pool needs, all of those things, yes. But also recognizing that as you go through the flow, the journey, the process, you're going to go through it and then you're going to back up a little bit and refine. And I know that when you look at that guide that we put together, the workbook that we put together, you sort of read through it. It does read very linear. First you do this and then you do that. And there's definitions. You're going to define your destinations or your dimensions. You're going to identify guideposts. You're going to identify goals. And there can be like this desire to get one step done and right before you move to the next. But what we know in having worked with a number of pools now going through this is that, as you work at something that maybe you initially defined as a guidepost is actually going to be better placed as a goal. And once you write those goals, you're going to back up and you're going to rewrite what you had originally put down as your guideposts. So just know that it's a refining process as well. And that you don't want to get stuck trying to find the perfect or the right answer. You just want to get something down. And then you want to back up and you want to test what you've written down, what you've typed out to make sure it still makes sense once you look at the totality of it. So modify it certainly, but also just get something down, get something started, and then you'll know when you get through that process whether you've got it exactly right for your pool.
Yeah, and it's a dynamic process that's never ending. Those of you who were in Alaska, we said this a lot. We don't do these as here's a 2-year digital roadmap and then that's it. You work it for 2 years and build another one. That's not how we do digital road mapping, right? You review it every quarter and you update it, right? You tweak it. And so Ann's right. It's like, just get something down. I think about, I've written 4 books, and I never went to a book writing school. So when I wrote books, I just wrote the way it was comfortable for me, which was I built an outline, and essentially that's what we've given you for the roadmap, right? Is an outline, a framework, right? I built that, and then I looked at it and I said, okay, that looks good. And then I would just start writing the chapters. And I didn't try to write every chapter as the Mona Lisa. I just tried to get something down for the chapter. And then I would get all the way through and I'd have 300 pages. And then I would have to go back over it a number of times to get it to all pull together and get every chapter to be fine. And then sometimes I had to cut stuff out, right? It's the same thing with doing a strategy. Get through the process, right? And then go back, refine it. You can move stuff around. Don't be legalistic, right? Don't be legalistic about in the workbook when we say, here's a step, here's a step, here's a step. All right, that was one lesson that we learned. At least it surprised me a little bit, is that a lot of the pooling folks, really try to like, what's right, what's perfect, Scott? We want to be perfect. And then that was getting in the way sometimes of just being effective. All right, this one, whole different direction on this. This one has become just a bit of a hot topic. And before I jump in and I start preaching about blueprints, what did you hear about blueprints?
Yeah, I was hoping I could start this one off, Scott, because this is one that I feel pretty strongly about. And when I look at the totality of what we've done so far, one thing I would probably do differently if I could is I would make the blueprinting process almost a precursor project to the residency. So when we're talking about blueprints, and Scott will talk more in detail about, from his perspective, what a blueprint looks like. From my perspective, grossly oversimplified terms, right? This is an inventory and a diagram, if you will, of what you have today. It's an inventory of your applications. It's an inventory of the data that you hold. It's a way to show how those things connect to one another and how that information flows. And the dilemma when you're going through the road mapping process is that if you don't have a good picture of what it is you have today, it makes it really difficult to look for where you can make improvements and what you want to do differently. Now, not impossible, because certainly every pool that's working this road mapping process, they've got goals, they have good ideas, they already know sort of intrinsically what they can do better, but they're having to back up and say, okay, now I know where I want to go, but I really have to make sure I understand where I am in order to draw the pathway to get there. So Scott, I know, is going to show some blueprints. He's going to talk about the blueprinting process more thoroughly, but just if I could give one piece of lesson, it would be, take the time right now to just inventory what you have, because you'll be so much better off in the process.
All right, great setup. Wow, I'm telling you, this is a topic we could stop and talk about now for 30 minutes, right? And I'm going to give you the fast version. First thing I want you to know, if you're a leader and you're listening to me right now, this is one of those things that is the new age leadership skill. A lot of leaders did not grow up having any idea how to blueprint technology or how to diagram technology. And now it is starting to become a mandatory skill that leaders know to ask for. I'm not saying, hey, Eric, you need to go open up Visio and go build blueprints. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying, Eric, is you have to know enough to ask your vendors, right, or your IT people, hey, I need diagrams. I need blueprints of my software layer. I need blueprints of my data layer so that we have a visual diagram of what we own, right? As Ann said, an inventory, but we need it visualized because these things are complicated. So I don't just want to list in a Word doc of what it is we own. I want to see it visually and how it relates to each other. And I'll explain more. But just understand, if you're a leader and you're listening right now, all we're asking is not that you could do this with your own hands, but that you know enough to ask your vendors or your team members to do this for you. And I kind of agree with Ann. I don't even know that you should be launching into building the next generation of your digital strategy if you never documented what you've already spent lots of money on. All right, so there you go. There's my pitch on that. There are so many things you can do with blueprints once you have them. I'll try to talk about that a little bit later. Now I'm going to put some slides behind me and just point to some things, okay? So the first thing you have to understand about blueprints, and by the way, we call them blueprints. You could call them diagrams. It doesn't matter. You could call them schematics. I don't really care about the vocabulary, right? We just tend to call them blueprints because we think that's the closest analogy, right? So the first thing you have to do is you have to understand that you need a visual language for your pool. You need a visual language that works for your pool. Now, this is a little bit of an art project in that you get to decide how complicated you want this visual language to be or not. But once you get your people or your vendors to select a visual language, you would want to stick with it from now on. So when you create a visual language, I'll show you what I mean. Like the first step is you create your icons. So the icons are always going to represent a piece of software, or they're going to represent a piece of data, right? A data source. And so each icon represents that. Each icon can be attributed any way you want. Now, this icon that I'm pointing to right here, the green around the outside has meaning, right? So if you look over here at application health, right, you can see that the green around the outside says, well, this one is in good shape, right? It's in positive shape, right? Now, your green around the outside or your red or yellow could mean anything you want. Yellow could mean it's a version behind. Red could mean it's 5 versions behind. So you get to decide what these color attributes mean. So you also see, tier 2, right? This is just an example of a language, right? That's just, well, what disaster recovery tier is, who owns the application? We mean who in the pool is responsible for that application? Is it on-prem or in the cloud? You probably get the idea, right? You can make these attributes be whatever you want. Now, here's just a different example. In this case, we didn't have this on the last one, but in this one, we put on a security level attribute. And we just made it a lock, and the different color locks tell you what this means. So the first thing that you do when you decide that you want to do blueprinting is you just create your visual language. So for example, how are you going to represent data flowing between applications? So here is an example of that, right? So here are different lines that could be used, different colors, dashes, things like that. And each one of them, it represents a different type of data flow. So I think you probably get the idea, but you can't do blueprinting until you decide what your visual language is going to be. And then once you build it for your pool, you really kind of want to lock it in because this is what you're going to do with it. And you want to fade me out? Yeah, that's fine. So this is just kind of a simple one for a pool, okay? And you can see we got origami risk in the middle of it. That would be normal. You got a member portal up there, right? So each one of these icons is attributed to show you the state that piece of software is in. You've got the data lines showing you, right, how data moves back and forth between that application. Pretty simple, right? And this one was just an example that we made up just to show you, so you could kind of see. Depending on how large or small your pool is, these blueprints get more or less complicated. In other words, they have more or less icons on them. But what I want you to do now is just kind of look at this. A couple things that I would share with you. You might notice over here, we say a level 1 application in a constellation format. When you do blueprints and you kind of start getting good at this, there's different formats. You don't have to do constellation, right? Which basically puts your bigger applications in the middle and smaller ones on the outside. There are other types of layouts if you want to do other types of layouts. In other words, we have some people that do blueprints from a member's viewpoint, and they go left to right, all the software that impacts a member. You know, it might have these same icons on here. It's just the way we lay them out on the page sends a different message, or it helps people understand, hey, here's the first technology a member might see, and then it goes all the way to our back office. So that's why there are different formats for these. The reason it says level 1 is because this is not that highly attributed. In other words, you might notice that there's no attribute on the 2 bottom parts of this icon. And so a level 2 has more attribution. It might have red flags on it, right? We put red flags, yellow flags on certain pieces of software if there's specific problems, and those red flags tie to a key. So you probably get what I'm saying here is I just want you to understand this concept. This is what it means to diagram or to blueprint your software layer. Now, I'm not going to show you a bunch of data layer. Let me just explain to you. A data layer diagram looks somewhat like this. The icons might be a different shape than these. And what they're showing is where's your data stored. And the interesting thing is you will have an icon for a file cabinet, an icon for a shared drive, an icon for a cloud database, an on-prem database. So instead of them all being the same shape, right, they might be completely different shapes because of where the data is stored. And I'll tell you, when you look at a data blueprint, it's always eye-opening, because when you red, yellow, green a data blueprint, as far as what shape is the data in, you'll be amazed how many times you have a yellow or a red icon, because it's either uncontrolled or it's not secure. You know, I mean, there's some problem with that database or that data source. But a data diagram just looks different in that the icons, you know, you literally might have some file cabinets sitting on here because the only place that that data exists is in paper. But the whole point of it is I want to see all the data the pool owns in one picture. I can't tell you how important this is, right? To have that kind of data layer blueprint. Ann, do you want to say something?
Yeah, I'm getting ready to jump in to say that if you are listening to Scott and you're freaking out a little bit about how you're ever going to create this and your head's buzzing with all the different pieces, I'm going to point you back to lesson number 1, which is just start with something. And it does not have to be a 6-sided icon, which I don't know what that is. Is that a hexagon? I have to stop and think. It's a hexagon? Whatever. It doesn't have to be a 6-sided icon. It could be a triangle. And maybe the only 3 things you need to know right now is who in the pool is assigned to own this and take care of it. And is it a third-party tool or not? And do we think we're okay with it? You know, kind of a red, green, yellow stoplight analysis. So just even if you go back to the simplest of terms, if it's an inventory and it's a list with some check marks behind it, you have to start somewhere. You have to start somewhere. So don't worry about getting it perfect. You will add to it like any data project. You'll build what you think you need, and then you'll find out that you wish you had tracked 2 other things for each software, and you'll go back and add that. But just start somewhere.
I agree. And this is done in PowerPoint, by the way, right? I mean, so it isn't like we're using some fancy piece of software. I mean, we just made it look nice, but I mean, it's just a PowerPoint slide is all this one is. So just start somewhere, build yours on a PowerPoint slide. The one thing I want to share with you that's kind of cool these days, more and more organizations are sharing these diagrams with new team members. So when a new team member goes to work for the pool, you show them this, or you give them a copy of this and you say, hey, here's all the software that we run on here at the pool. Research, as people have researched how long it takes the average person to learn all the software at the company that they work at, and it's 6 months. 6 months from the time they start to the time where they can tell you the names of all the software and how it works together, right? And they need to know that because they're using all these tools. So it's kind of, I'm just giving you like for bonus points, is create some version of your software blueprint and always give a copy to new team members and just say, hey, here's all the software you're going to be running into. Now, when you hear these names, you'll be able to look at this and see, you know, what we call things and why we call things, you know, what we call them. All right. There we go. That's blueprints. enough time on that. Let's go on to lesson number 3. This is something that, we see with the pools, and people were a little bit struck by when we've talked about it, but also I've seen it for a long time in my career, which is you can have the best strategy ever created and it can still fail. And the reason is because it's your team members that have to enact the strategy. And so we could give all kinds of analogies. I could say, a genius football coach could have the best game plan ever, but not have the team that cares to learn it or has the capability to execute it. And it doesn't matter how great that playbook was. Now, in Alaska, I gave this analogy, around, what if I took my teenagers and I said, hey, we're all going to get healthy. I got a whole plan. I've written it out, right? We're all going to stick to this plan. We're all going to get extremely healthy. And we're going to start tomorrow. And I hand that to my teenagers, right? They are not going to be on board with all these things I planned out for us to get healthy. So it is important to understand that you've got to operationalize a digital strategy. You want to change that 10% number, that only 10% are successful. Step 1, you've got to develop a inspiring strategy that people are excited with. Step 2 is you have to get the team to accept it, be excited about doing it, hold them accountable. You've got to operationalize the plan. And I would say my observation, 40% of the game is designing a great digital strategy roadmap. 60% of the game is operationalizing it. So I know that that word may not have a whole lot of meaning. And so let's break down that word for just a second. These are just some of the things that are important to do when you operationalize a digital strategy. First thing is do it as a team. Don't have this be, you as the leader and one technology person. And that's too often, that's what it looks like, it's just a couple leaders that put together the digital strategy and then drop it on everybody else. Try to put together a wider team that has people that represent different major parts of the pool. You might involve a board member or two. You could involve a member or two, right? But really give some thought to what is the best team to help develop the digital strategy. And don't be afraid to have some people on the team that maybe you haven't tried before, experiment a little bit with it, but choose a good team. That's right off the bat to operationalize. Second thing is really identify who the audiences are for the roadmap. Let me give you an example of what I mean. Here are 4 audiences that every pool surely should consider. The board, right, or your governing body, the executive team, right, the leadership team, your entire team, and your members, or at least some of your core main members, right? So there's 4 different audiences for your digital strategy roadmap. Now, it doesn't mean that you're going to show all of them a 100-slide PowerPoint that you created, right? But it does mean that you're sharing at least the kernel, the core of the important parts of the strategy, the guideposts, the dimensions, right? I mean, you're at least sharing pieces like that with these audiences so that you can get feedback from them and also get their buy-in to what you're wanting to do. All right. Third thing in operationalizing is that perpetual model I mentioned to you. Change the thinking from I do a 1-year or I do a 2-year digital strategy and then we work it for 2 years and then we throw it away and we start over. Change the thinking to no. We have a perpetual digital strategy. We design it as a rolling 2-year. In other words, we're always looking 2 years out, but it's a rolling 2 years. Every quarter, we review it. We look at our progress. We see what changes we need to make, right? And then we extend it out another quarter. So it's a different way to do strategy, is a rolling perpetual model. That's a great way to operationalize. Why? Because technology changes too darn fast, right? It changes too fast. And too many things come up over that 2 years. This is different than your business strategy, your core business strategy. With it, you can set a target and work on it for a couple of years and not much changes, right? The dynamics don't change. It's not the way in technology. So that's a third thing. Fourth thing, study the environment the strategy is going to land in. So I just told you that I used this analogy of what if I came home with my teenagers and said, I have this great plan. We're all going to get really healthy. You all are going to stop using your devices so much. You're going to get outside and you're going to exercise instead of being on the device. We're all going to eat completely differently. It's going to be much better. It's going to taste horrible, but it's going to be much better for all of us. I got a plan. Look, that's going to crash on the rocks, right? Because I haven't really studied the environment that my strategy is going to land in. And I'm telling you, too many leaders develop a digital strategy and just toss it out to their pool, like to their team members. Here we go. Here it is. That is not creating fertile ground for a strategy to land. So we got to study the environment and we got to understand what might need to be improved. What do we do to create fertile ground for that strategy to be enacted? And then the last thing in operationalizing a plan is to really look at what type of business analysis might we want to do on some of the areas of this strategy. In other words, hey, if we say we want to do automation, we want to automate a lot of what the pool's doing. Okay, I love automation as a focus, but how much is that going to cost? And what's the ROI on that? And when are we going to get that money back? So if we put $1 in automation today, how long does it take before we get that dollar back? Right? That's doing a business analysis on a piece of the strategy. But there are other things we can analyze, like how much technology debt do we have? How far are we behind where we should be? We could look at resources and, do we actually have the resources to do this part of the plan? Again, I mentioned incentive plans before. Should we factor in some incentive plans for part of this strategy? So these are all things that just think about them as, I have a digital strategy now, but let me go back and do some business analysis of what else do I need to know about this? What other details do I need to know? So this isn't everything, but this is probably 80% of what you need to know to operationalize a plan well. Just wanted to make sure we shared that with you because, again, too many pool leaders, I think, they would be excited about just having a really nice PowerPoint with some really good ideas for the next couple of years. And remember, that's 40% of the game, right? That doesn't get your strategy done. And I didn't give you a chance to talk. Were you so blown away by what I just said? You're like, I don't even need to add anything, or?
I mean, you can't improve on perfection.
I'm on it. Oh, the adrenaline's flowing now, even though it's Friday. The adrenaline's flowing. All right. Well, then let's go.
I think actually, Scott, yeah, you kind of leapfrogged. Actually, you overachieved because I think you hit some of these already too. So go for it. Keep going.
Yeah. All right. So the last one is the importance of measuring the impact of the strategy. Sometimes you'll hear us use different words. We'll say, hey, you got to really make sure you have KPIs. You got to have guideposts. You got to have, narrative goals. You got to know what your destination is. You're going to hear us talk, a lot about words like that. And you'll see that if you didn't go to Alaska and you go through the tools that we gave you at the beginning. I would sum that all up to say, one of the things we've observed through this year is some people think that a digital strategy is, I'm going to install some new software and we're going to change the phone system out. Like that's to them what a digital strategy is. Obviously, a digital strategy covers way more bases. What is critical to understand is not only do you need to know, hey, what's everything we're trying to do with the digital strategy, what is the impact going to be? Right? I mean, that's something that you need to be able to measure. Let me give you an example. If you say part of your digital strategy is member experience, right? And that's a great one for all of you. We want to use digital tools to just nail it with member experience over the next 5 years because we can. I mean, we can make things self-serve. We can make things easier for them to find. We can turn things around quicker, right? Okay, great. If member experience is something you want, one of the things you have to be able to do is how are you going to measure or analyze that you actually created a better member experience? There are times, I'm sure a lot of you might agree with this, there are times where you've given new technology to your membership, and a lot of them have said to you, we don't like it. We don't like it. We liked it better the old way. Hey, when we were faxing claims into you, we thought that was better. We used to call you on the phone and talk to you about the claims. We enjoyed that, right? Now the claims filing's completely done over the computer. It's no fun anymore, right? It's breaking our relationship with you. Now, we could argue about that all day long, but my point is, every time you say, I'm going to do something in a digital strategy, you also have to understand, how are we going to measure that? We spent $100,000 doing this thing. How are we going to measure whether that thing did what we hoped it would do? This is where a strategy gets separated from a Gantt chart of projects, right? That when we ask you, show us your pool's digital strategy, and you hand us a Gantt chart of projects. Okay, that's not a strategy. That's just some modernization, some installs that you want to do. That is not a strategy. It gets a lot more to be a strategy if we can at least say, and by doing all these things, here's what the results are going to be. Here's how we measure success. Here's how it's going to be a blessing to all of our members. How are we going to measure that stuff, right? It's important to do. That's kind of our lesson 4. Don't just have a Gantt chart of projects without understanding what the outcomes are you really want to get.
Scott, I'm thinking about one of our pool administrators who is now retired, who had a way that he would approach this impact analysis. And in my head, it plays sort of like a Mad Libs. You know what Mad Libs is, where, right, you have to fill in certain words. And so it's a statement, and there are 3 Mad Lib like blanks, right? So the statement goes like this: if we implement blank, whatever it is, the aspect of the digital strategy, right? If we implement blank, the impact will be blank, and we'll know it because blank, right? So what's the element of the strategy you're implementing? What's the intended impact? And then how are you going to measure it? And that's a pool tested strategy time and time again. You just have to have the right blanks in that Mad Lib game.
Yeah, I can't tell you how many times people, a pool leader has said to me, hey, we're going to make this move with technology. And I say, why? And they go, because we need to. Our thing was old. It was old. We need to. We need to upgrade it. Why are you even asking me that question? Yes, I know we need to upgrade it. Yes, I know it's old. But what are we trying to achieve here? Oh, we need a new thing because it'll be better. Okay, I get it. But better how? And what's it going to do for us? And how does that help members? It's just going to do the Mad Lib, like Ann said, and answering all the questions instead of just, oh, we need to upgrade this because it's old. All right, there you go. There are our 4 lessons. Let me just sum up this podcast by saying, we've been very happy with the progress that a lot of the pools and the pool leaders have made with just their process for doing digital strategy. And so it's been great to see. I think that's part of what's motivated us to really try to put some good tools out there for you. You got to go do it. You just have to do the work. Again, this is a new type of strategy. You just got to get in there and do something, work it all the way through, learn the skill. You just got to learn the skill, right? And there's no easy way around just investing the time to learn the skill. I'll give you just an analogy for this. I have for a long time, I've really been interested in Web3 and cryptocurrencies and all that kind of stuff. But I never went out and actually bought cryptocurrencies, right? I just studied the industry, but I never did it with my own hands. And then there came a day where I said, that's it. I'm going to go buy a bunch of crypto. I'm going to get into a DAO, a distributed autonomous organization. I'm going to use dApps, right? Distributed applications. I'm going to do it all. I'm going to buy NFTs. I'm going to do it all. I'm going to do it all with my own hands. And it's hard. It's even for me, it's hard to sit down and spend all the time and do all the work to learn that whole new world that I didn't know, so that I would know it with my own hands. And I did it. I can't tell you, I learned a huge amount from doing it. I'm very glad I did it. But there really was this sense of, okay, I got to dive into this world. I got to invest time so that I know it firsthand. And this is what I'm asking you all to do, right? Improve your digital strategies, do the blueprinting, figure out, how you're going to measure the success on all these things. Do it once, you'll learn a lot, and then this will be a skill you'll have the rest of your leadership careers.
Perfect. So the real goal of office hours is the discussion time. This is the point